You were at a wedding at a country church one Saturday. The bride and groom are friends of yours, the latest in a long line to tie the knot over the past couple of years. You're aware that almost identical scenes are being played out simultaneously around Britain. The service rattles by. The photographer, forbidden to use his flash during the service, fiddles with a long lens. The mother of the groom bats away a tear as the organist bashes out the recessional and the married pair walk triumphantly through the beaming ranks of their friends. This has been my Saturday afternoon routine for more than 35 years. I've heard Mendelssohn's March more than 1,000 times. I've seen marriage vows broken on the same day they were made, witnessed a jilting at the altar, slept with a bridesmaid when I should be taking a picture, watched a man die of a stroke as his newly wedded daughter was leaving the church. I don't think there's anything that can happen at a wedding which I haven't seen. And yet of the tens of thousands of people I have photographed, very few would recognise me if they saw me today. In fact, few would remember that I was ever there. I was born in 1950 and given the inauspicious name Dominic Kitchen. I'm 7 years younger than my brother Max and 9 years younger than my sister Victoria. Being the youngest member of the family by such a margin gave me a lingering feeling of being permanently behind everyone else, especially my brother. Max did everything possible to encourage me in this belief. On one of London's many park streets, where we lived at number 40, London's austere post-war sky hung like a bowl of dirty water. My father was a sports journalist, covering Arsenal for the local paper. He had a fine head of black hair which never went grey, and glasses which gave him the appearance of intellectualism. These, he used to say, saved me from the army. On winter afternoons his glasses misted up, and he wore a red and white football scarf knitted by Mum years before. Mum had no interest in football. Her only opinion on the game was that a man ought to wear a nice scarf when watching it. Although Victoria lived with us, I sometimes barely saw her for days at a stretch. She smoked cigarettes at breakfast and cooked her own meals at what seemed impossible times. I would marvel at the smell of toasted cheese wafting up from downstairs at midnight. Where Max was at pains to shut his world away from me, Victoria allowed me unexpected glimpses of hers. One Saturday afternoon she called me from upstairs. "Domino!" At the sound of Victoria's voice, I rose straight away and scampered up the stairs. "Dom!" The voice called again. I realised it was coming from the bathroom. "Be the best brother ever and get me my book, will you?" I pushed open the door of her bedroom. On the bed was a little green packet of tablets, and as she had said, the book, Lolita. I picked it up and knocked tentatively on the bathroom door. "Come in!" I nudged the door open. Victoria was lying in the bath, cocooned in soupy, foamy water. The tips of her shoulders were just visible above the waterline, and her feet rested next to the taps. I averted my eyes with what I imagined was gentlemanly discretion. "You can look at me. I saw you naked the day you were born." I let my eyes rise from the messy heap of her discarded clothes and come to rest upon Victoria herself. Want to see something secret? Her left leg rose slowly out of the bath, a pink foot brushing against the porcelain tap with its swirling H. Just above the rim of the water, a little way up from her knee, I could see a small green and brown mark. I had forgotten my embarrassment now. I leaned closer, and the mark, at first hard to make out, revealed its shape. A tortoise. "It's a tattoo." Victoria patted the tiny head proudly with a forefinger. "What do you make of that?" She had always been fond of tortoises, and sometimes during the holidays she looked after one belonging to her friend Maudie. I stared at the image inked on her thigh. "It's excellent," I said after some consideration. She laughed. Thanks, Dom. Where did you get it? A bloke in Willesden. Did it hurt? It did, rather. My mind struggled to paint the scene from the limited palette of my imagination. Penny for your thoughts? I was just wondering if Mum and Dad know. Victoria let a soft whistle of amusement through her teeth. Of course not. Can you imagine? She retracted her legs slowly, and the tortoise vanished from sight. If word got round at church, poor old Mum would hardly dare go up for the communion. Her eyebrows lifted with an affectionate scorn, and the dark eyes shone at me again. So, Dom, you must take this secret to the grave. Our mother was singing her something-somethings downstairs. We listened for a moment. You only live once, Dom, and some people don't even do that. When I was 12, Max went to Oxford, and things began to change. On a very warm afternoon late in September, we all went together to deliver Max to his new home. The centre of Oxford was clogged with little cars dropping off serious young men and their belongings. We were directed to a pale stone building. Above the entrance to the stairwell, names had been written in a fussy hand which made them look as if they had been there 100 years already. 1. Kitchen, M. 2. Shillingworth, T. 3. Rodwell, J. I still think of the few moments I spent looking up at my brother's name next to Shillingworth T. To think that at the time this name meant nothing to me gives the memory a peculiar quality. Almost makes me doubt that it comes from my own life. We spent an hour or so carrying belongings from the car into the bare room. I stayed close to Victoria, who hefted boxes out of the boot 2 at a time under Mum's wary glance. Careful, get Max to help with that one. I'm fine, Victoria muttered. She's like a boy, she really is, lamented Mum, watching Victoria stride across the quad. When at last he could decently be rid of us, Max saw us out into the yard, and there we encountered Rodwell J. He spoke in a voice which reminded me of people on the radio. I've just met the other chap, said Rodwell. Tom Shillingworth, very nice fellow. Do you know, he already plays cricket for Surrey? Rodwell's little eyes gleamed excitably behind the spectacles. Think we've struck lucky landing next to him? This, again, was a moment I would look back on many times. Oh, it's all been a bit much today, Mum said quietly on the way home. The next evening was another warm one. Victoria came home at about tea time and went straight out to the garden to check on Hercules, her friend's tortoise. Not the same without Max, is it? No, I said. It's better. She cackled at this. It was always a good adult feeling making her laugh. Our next-door neighbour, Mrs. Linus, appeared at the fence, a washing basket in her chubby arms. Her face was wide and pink. She breathed distractingly loudly, even when at rest. Although she was probably the same age as our parents, I imagined her 20 years older. Max gone to Oxford then, has he? She was one of those people whose main conversational pleasure lies in the reiteration of known facts. Yes, went yesterday. Brainy one, isn't he? He certainly is. Victoria smiled politely and turned back towards me as if to continue our conversation, but Mrs. Linus's attention had been caught by Hercules the tortoise. Been lumped with him again, have you? Funny little thing, isn't he? What's he eat? Victoria smiled with obvious effort. Oh, lettuce and so on. Hercules had now wandered halfway into the bag and was jerking his head around, trying to shake it off. Mrs. Linus cackled. Stupid little bugger, isn't he? That tortoise may be stupid, said Victoria, but he is likely to live to at least 100. He'll be here when you and I are long gone. That brought the conversation to a halt, but it was reanimated by the dashing figure of Mr. Linus, who appeared on the lawn wearing a white cap and a pair of sunglasses. Blimey, O'Reilly, Pat, going to be out here all bloody night? I was just saying about Max gone up to Oxford. Yeah, anyone think he'd been knighted? But you're getting sick of the subject, eh? Oh, we've been sick of it for quite a while. Victoria replied breezily. Mr. Linus raised his cap to Victoria and put his hand on Mrs. Linus's arm. "We've got to be going, love." We watched them go back across the lawn. He took her arm again and guided her inside. That was the last time we ever saw Mr. Linus. 3 days later, he left forever. It was weeks before Victoria and I found out, though, and even then only through corner shop gossip. "Dom, sensational news." She waited until dinner before confronting our parents. "Is it true that Mr. Linus has gone?" There was a pause. They looked at each other and set down their cutlery, as if by prior arrangement. "I believe it is," said Dad in the end, frowning at the boiled potatoes on his plate. "Why?" Dad shook his head. "We've no idea." "Are they getting divorced? You must have talked about it." "There's talking about it and there's sticking your nose in," said Mum. "We've been round to make sure Mrs. Linus is all right. We haven't been prying." "Cracking bit of beef," said Dad, not bothering to disguise his intention to close the conversation down. Goodness. Victoria's dark eyes were dancing. Drama on Park Street. I wonder what it was. Has he run off with a Czechoslovakian dowager? Or perhaps it's none of our business, said Dad. I can't see how it can not be your business to ask after people who are pretty much your closest friends, Victoria muttered. No, well, said Mum. There we are. Lovely bit of beef, Dad confirmed. And that was that, for the biggest conversation topic of recent times. Do you think they actually know what happened and just won't tell us? I asked. It's funny. I mean, the Linuses have lived next door since before I was born, I think. Dad and Mr. Linus go back forever. But in all that time, I'm not sure they've ever discussed anything but football. I've never known them actually have a conversation. On the other hand, Victoria speculated, it could be that they just don't like discussing scandal at the dinner table. Why is it a scandal? A divorce is still a big hoo-ha. You're meant to tie the knot and then stay together till death, if not longer. That's what Mum and Dad are doing. Mum was barely 18, said Victoria. You can see why she's worried about me getting left on the shelf. You won't be. Thank you, Dom. And what makes you so sure? Well, you're... I searched my brain for something I was sure would go down well. You're larger than life. She squawked at this. Larger than life? Well, that's exactly what every man is looking for. I sensed my compliment had misfired. Sorry. No, I'm charmed. Victoria grinned and ruffled my hair. I lay awake that night, listening to the low voices of my parents downstairs, wondering whether they were talking about the Linuses. Mr. Linus's disappearance seemed to herald a time of change. As long as I could remember, the family had gone to Southwold every summer for a holiday. But at the end of his first year at Oxford, Max announced that he was going off with some friends, including the cricketer Shillingworth, whose family owned a farmhouse in Provence. The news caused Victoria to stare darkly into her bowl of porridge. In his place, Victoria brought a friend, Maudie. She was very thin, and mumbled so quietly you weren't always sure she had spoken at all. Without Max, things at Southwold were different, particularly when evening came. Victoria and Maudie went back out to the beach to smoke and raided the chip shop for late-night feasts. The chip shop was run by a fat, whiskery man who wore a monocle. Haddock again, old boy? No, old girl, would you like salt on your chips? Let's get this back to the beach before it gets cold then, old boy, said Victoria as we left one night. The three of us screamed with laughter. On the last evening of the holiday, our parents set off, as ever, for a long walk. I had high hopes for the evening now they were out of the way, especially when Victoria sidled confidentially up to me. Maudie and I are going to the pub. I'm not meant to leave you on your own, but I think you can repel any enemies that might come by, can't you? Of course. I expected Mum and Dad to be angry when they returned, but they were in a holiday mood. Mum murmured a couple of half-hearted remarks about how Victoria could hardly be trusted to look after a tortoise. The lights went out. Dad's familiar snore, the sound of someone continuously inflating a balloon and then letting it go down again, began to sound in the half-dark. I had drifted into a half-sleep when there was a sharp prick of light. I sat upright and saw Victoria, torch beam over half her face, peering in. I pulled a jumper on over my pyjamas and tiptoed out. "Will you accompany us on a jaunt to the beach, old boy?" Midnight, normally out of my reach, seemed charged with some special energy. Victoria and Maudie were noisy and unsteady from the drink. "You must forgive us, old boy," said Victoria. "We've had one or two, as they say in the army." From her pocket, Victoria now brought a little hip flask. She took an energetic swig, then wiped her mouth and handed the flask to me. "All yours, old boy. You have to start on the booze sooner or later." The flask went round between the three of us, and they continued their conversation, while I grasped eagerly for whatever I could understand. Any time now, the Americans could launch a big fat nuclear bomb towards Russia, and from here we would have a lovely view of it going whoosh across the sky, and then, well, that would be that. "You will scare Dominic talking like this," said Maudie. "They won't get Dom," Victoria said. "I'll throw myself between him and the bomb. What I'm saying is, they could kill us all any time, so I'm bloody well going to do whatever I can until then. And on that note, I propose that we all go for a dip in the North Sea." Maudie gasped. "What, but we haven't costumes with us." "Good Lord," said Victoria. "Where's your sense of adventure?" She had stepped out of her dress already, and was standing in her underwear on the sand, prodding the water's edge with her toe. "It's bloody cold. Come on!" Victoria tossed her bra back towards me and kicked her knickers off. I hastily averted my eyes as, with a yell of joy, she disappeared into the water, followed by her friend. Everything had happened so quickly. "Come on, Dom!" Victoria shouted. "Come on!" "I'm fine here." "Stick in the mud," called Victoria. "There are towels in the beach hut," I called. "I'll go and get them for you." I fetched 2 towels and tried to trace a straight path back down towards the sea, feeling rather nauseous as the whisky took hold. Maudie was first out of the water. Dropping my gaze once more, I threw down the towels a few paces away from her. When I looked up again, Victoria, naked, was bending to claim one of them. I glimpsed the swing of her breasts as she stooped, and for a second my eye rested on the spot where she had shown me the tortoise tattoo, and crept upwards towards the tangle of hair, which was then, to my relief, obscured by the towel. We walked slowly back to our base. My brain felt like a ball of wool, and the whisky had left me with a hard, sour pain in my stomach. But there was something else creeping through my guts, less a pain than a strange clenching, like the cramps I felt before a dentist's appointment or a test at school. I felt as if all my insides had been tied into a single knot. When I closed my eyes, I could see the moon's soft torchlight on Maudie's skin, and my sister reaching for the towel. I was young enough not to have had feelings quite like these before. I lay there waiting to fall asleep and wake up with everything back to normal. On the afternoon of Christmas Day 1963, Victoria handed me a box covered in a red and green paper. "Merry Christmas, old boy." I tore at the wrapping. The box inside was white, heavy like a brick, and inside it was a rectangular object. A camera! I turned it over in my hands, running my fingers over the cold metal sides, opening and closing the hatch where you loaded the film. I kissed my sister on the cheek and went upstairs to stash the Instamatic safely in its box under my bed. Over the coming months, very little activity in our household escaped the Instamatic. The summer holiday came round again, and with no Max or Maudie this time, I had Victoria to myself for several long evenings. We walked on the beach, and she let me try my first cigarettes. A couple of weeks later, the two of us went to the photo shop to collect our records of the holiday. The Irish owner, Roger Daly, had known Victoria for years, and always developed my films for free. I'd brought out the 3rd set of pictures and was looking at a couple. both with long golden hair, standing naked in a field. "This isn't ours," I said. "Oh," said Daly, "I've made a bit of a bollocks. Mixed your film up with someone else's. Sorry, Dominic." He delved under the desk and brought out 2 huge handfuls of identical yellow packets. It'll be one of these. I'm all over the place since Ronnie left." He grimaced at Victoria. "You're not wanting any extra work, are you? Just at weekends, or—" "I honestly couldn't, Roger. I need some time to get drunk and have fun, you know." "I could do it," I piped up. Daly raised his eyebrows. "How old are you, Dominic?" 15, I said. "More or less." "I like your spirit," Daly grinned. "You're hired." Over the school months to come, I half-consciously withdrew from my studies and waited impatiently for the weekend to come, so I could get back to thumbing through pictures fresh from the darkroom. It was never quite clear why I had chosen this as my mission, but taking pictures was now all I was ever likely to devote myself to. One Saturday, I came home from work and challenged Dad to a game of chess. It dawned on me after a little while that I had held out for longer than I managed in most games. A little later, I was winning, and eventually, the unthinkable. "Checkmate!" Dad took off his glasses. "Goodness, is it?" "It is! Look!" It was a historic moment in my brief life, but there was something odd in Dad's failure to acknowledge it. His muted reaction suggested that he hadn't quite been concentrating on the game, or even worse, had let me win. I went upstairs to report back to Victoria, but she had some news of her own. "Max has been promoted. He's got a big job now with his friend's dad." "The one he was at university with?" "Yeah. His old man runs some shifty company managing sports people. Max is going to be second in command. No doubt he'll make an enormous great success of it. We've been invited to a big party." "Am I going?" "You bloody well have to. I'm not spending all night with some ghastly cricketer and his snub-nosed parents without you." The Shillingsworth house was grand, ivy-covered, and situated on its own with a huge driveway. People were swarming around the front door holding champagne flutes. Max was waiting for us. He had flared trousers on and a cricket jumper. "Didn't know you were bringing Dominic?" "He's here as my chaperone," said Victoria. Max led us to a long table. "This is George Shillingworth, my new boss," said Max proudly. He indicated a tanned man with bright white hair, who nodded at Dad. "And this is Tom Shillingworth." He was at least 6 feet tall, sandy-haired, with an eager, good-natured face. He could not have looked more like a sporting hero if he had been transported straight from the pages of a comic. "Tom, of course, plays cricket for Surrey," said Max, still talking as if he were presenting This Is Your Life, "and is about to make his debut for England." "God willing," said Tom Shillingworth modestly. His eyes, which had been moving politely over the group of us, came to rest on Victoria. The colour rose in Victoria's cheeks for a second as she shook his hand. Then he kissed her on the cheek and did the same to my mother. "Well, if Max got the brains, it's pretty obvious who got the looks," said Tom Shillingworth. I felt very strongly, and with that knotting of my insides which came from time to time, that it was a bad thing we'd ever fallen in with these people. I've made many mistakes in my life, but I was right about that. Victoria and the cricketer got married 3 years later. He took her on his tours to New Zealand and Australia, India and Pakistan. I mooched around the empty-feeling house on Park Street, taking photographs and waiting for postcards to arrive from all corners of the globe. "Sir Dominic of London. Bought 6 hats today and ate a cheese only just smaller than my head. Hope you're keeping an eye on the parents while I swan around with my fiancée. I remain Victoria Kitchen, the future Mrs. S." Yes, she was in love all right. And although marriage was meant to be about joining 2 families together, it felt as if she were becoming part of the Shillingworths much faster than the cricketer was becoming one of us. At 1:45 on the wedding afternoon, I caught Victoria pacing behind the church in Marylebone. She was anxiously holding up her big lampshade of a dress to stop it trailing in the dry grass. "Oh boy, what are you doing here?" "Said I was going to take some snaps. What are you doing here? Aren't you meant to be late for the wedding?" "Collywobbles. Got the driver to drop me off." She wrinkled her nose. "I'm hungry. You haven't got any cheese by any chance?" course I haven't got any cheese. Do you think I carry cheese around in my pockets? I assume everyone does. I took a fag from my jacket pocket. Oh, you're the best brother ever. I lit it with a match and put it in her mouth. Why the collywobbles? Just all a bit much, isn't it, as Mum would say. I'm really only a kid, Donkins, like you. But now, a wife. You won't be just his wife, I said. You'll still be, what you are. What am I? You're larger than life. She beamed at the memory of this earnest phrase. Ah, yes. So what are you, anyway? Smaller than life? I think, I said after considering it, I'm about the same size as life. She laughed. The two of us stood in silence for a moment. Anyway, I ventured, feeling rather unequal to the conversational territory. You must, love him. Oh, I do, said Victoria. He's a wonderful man and he makes me laugh ever so much, more than anyone. And he's so talented. She bit her lip and I thought she was about to say something else. But then we heard voices on the other side of the wall, and she hastily dropped the cigarette and speared the butt on the heel of her shoe. You ought to get back in there, she said. It occurred to me, as I walked away, that it might be a long, long time before I got a few minutes alone with her again, that in only a couple of hours she would belong to someone else. In truth, of course, the transition had taken place some time before. Not allowed to take pictures in the church, I watched the first of what would be thousands of weddings. It did not feel as if the garlanded Victoria at the altar were the same Victoria I had drunk gin and played the number plate game with. I had seen The Graduate not long ago, and for a second the idea of a dramatic intervention fluttered at the back of my neck. Of course, there was no such excitement, and before long the two of them swept back down the aisle. As they passed me, I tried to catch Victoria's eye and give her a wink, but someone leaned across my field of vision to kiss her on the cheek, and then they were gone. I began to wander around with the camera, racking up shots of people I didn't know. Later, in the marquee, the shuffling tones of the jazz band had given way to livelier fare, but the real action was on the other side of the party. About 20 revellers had set up camp with magnums of champagne. Girls slumped on the yellow-green grass as they swigged from bottles. A few men in rolled-up shirt-sleeves were booting a football about with the usual exclamations. In the middle of it all, a photographer was cajoling Victoria and the cricketer into a series of late wedding day poses. And another of those lovely smiles. The football came to rest a few feet from the photographer. "Over here!" yelled someone, but he ignored the game altogether and bent over his tripod again. "Just one more, with that little laugh?" "Hey, kick it back!" yelled a drunken guest. The photographer ignored them again, and this time it was a mistake. I turned around to see an ugly tangle of men, suit tails and shirt ends flapping. The jumble hurtled down towards the river. "Jesus, watch out!" yelled the cricketer. But for once, nobody was listening to him. Victoria let out a horrified shriek. The glued-together men, at the mercy of their own momentum, went careering past the photographer and with a tremendous splash plunged into the river, taking the camera with them. Then he yelled, "You utter fucking bastards! You absolute stupid bastards! You'll have to pay a lot of money for that, a lot of money!" The cricketer was raising his hands in an emollient gesture, like the fine sportsman he was meant to be. "We'll take care of all that." "Well, I don't know who's going to sort out your pictures," snapped the photographer. "Those are gone, sir." He cocked a thumb towards the river. "Those are bloody well gone." Victoria bit her lip. "I've got some good ones," I said, so quietly that nobody heard it, but with a rising feeling of triumph. Daly developed my films, enlarged about a dozen shots, and had his assistant Lauren arrange them in a hide-bound album with patterns of psychedelic hearts and jagged suns fringing the pages. He gave it to Victoria and the cricketer as a gift. Then he waited for the orders to come in. The quality of the pictures was nothing special, but since people had thought there were no pictures at all, they were received like masterworks. Daly had long been photographing weddings as a sideline to his main business, but this was the moment he realised fully how lucrative it could be. I left school and began a night school course in advanced photography, worked full-time in the shop, and within the year would be Daly's business partner. Daly and I did a couple of weddings every weekend, and sometimes even midweek. Albums, enlargements, duplicate sets. Sometimes I went alone in my new Ford Capri, and then I would stay late, dance, and perhaps steal a fumble with someone in a hotel room or car park. Saturdays blurred into one long, heady party. I enjoyed the ceremonies, which I could now follow word for word in my head. I enjoyed the rampaging hormones of the reception even more. It was hard to believe that I'd depended so heavily upon Victoria for my understanding of the opposite sex. For the first time ever, I found I didn't really want to see Victoria, because it would mean seeing the cricketer. The trouble with rich, powerful people isn't merely that they always insist their way is the right way, but that they very often have a point. When Dad's 60th birthday came round, nobody quite knew how to celebrate it. But old man Shillingworth had a plan. Why didn't we come round to the mansion for dinner? Victoria and Max loved the idea, of course, and so we piled into the old Fiat as a family for the first time in years. Given that the dinner was meant to be in Dad's honour, he was hardly involved in the conversation, which was not really a conversation, but a monologue delivered by old man Shillingworth. And that is why women, I heard him say around 9 o'clock, should be realistic about what they can achieve. They weren't designed to do the same things as men, any more than dogs were meant to fly aeroplanes. I thought Victoria would surely intervene, but when I looked up hopefully, I saw that her eyes were on the door. "Where's Dad?" He had excused himself some 20 minutes ago. I'm sure everything is all right," said Mum awkwardly. "He's probably got lost," said Max. "This is the sort of house people do get lost in." Victoria still looked anxious. "I might just go and call to see if he's all right." "I'll come," I said quickly. "Where do you think he might—" But Victoria had already paused by a huge picture window at the halfway point of the staircase. Shit. She pointed out into the dark garden. Between the dots of fuzzy light reflected in the window, our father could be seen standing motionless between two towering conifers. Come on, old boy. When we got close to Dad, he was standing quite still, gazing up into the cloudy night sky. Victoria gently advanced towards him and put an arm around his shoulders. "What on earth are you doing out here?" "Well, the fact is, it's hard to say, really." In the dusk, I caught for a second a liquid fear in Victoria's eyes. They widened and moistened momentarily in a way I had never seen before. "Righto, well, it's getting chilly. Let's get you inside." We arrived back in the banquet room to an ironic welcome from old man Shillingworth. "Fancied a spin in the garden, did you, Harry?" "Very pleasant. Breath of fresh air," said my father softly. Our mother couldn't look at him as he sat down beside her. I couldn't be sure if we were all discovering at the same time that something was wrong with Dad, or if everyone but me had known it all along. Shortly after, our mother rose with strained dignity. "This has been a really lovely evening, but Harry and I had better be going." "Oh, no, stay longer," Shillingworth urged. "No, we really ought to go," she said firmly. "You don't have to come home with us. You children should stay and have fun." "Maybe," said Max, uncharacteristically hesitant, "maybe we should stay and give Mum and Dad a bit of peace. Let them enjoy the last bit of the birthday together." Victoria looked at me. I suddenly knew that I desperately did not want to be back in the car, chugging in silence back to our little house. "It might be fun to stay," I mumbled. I felt for a second as if I were betraying my parents, but the look on Mum's drawn face was now unmistakably one of relief. Between them, Max and Victoria somehow made the old man understand that we would like to be alone, and we retired to a magnificent library. We sat in leather armchairs. Max pensively filled our glasses with claret. Victoria took a long gulp of her wine. "So," she said, "is he ill?" "There may not be anything as dramatic as that," said Max quickly. "He's always been a bit eccentric." "Not like that. He was always vague, but this is different." "Dominic, you've been living there. Has he been doing this sort of thing a lot?" Not really. I mean, the thing is, although I do live there, I don't necessarily really see them all that much." "But Mum must have said something." "Mum never says anything," I pointed out. "Mum never will say anything," Victoria agreed. "You know what she's like. That's how she was brought up. That's our family. That's how people like us—" Max interrupted her. "Would you mind awfully, just once, having a conversation without making everything into some sort of flimsy point about society?" "I'm just trying to work out," said Victoria in an unusually high, wavering voice, "how it is that if there is some problem, we've let this develop in front of us." "In front of us?" echoed Max. "It's hardly been in front of you, has it? You've been swanning all around the world for the past 3 or 4 years. I'm surprised you can remember where they live." "Oh, and you've been a model son, I suppose," snapped Victoria. "Call the parents every night, do you? Check up on them?" "It's a fair point," I said. "She's been in Australia. You're only up the road." "Ah, the runt of the litter joins in," spat Max. "Max!" Victoria warned. "Well, for heaven's sake. So you've been actually living in their house, and yet it's everyone else's fault." "It's all our fault!" screamed Victoria. Max hissed at her. "Keep your bloody voice down!" There was a long silence. Max rose to his feet. "I don't think we're going to agree on this for now. So I'm going to have a bath, and then I'm going to bed. And I strongly suggest you do the same. Good night." Victoria and I sat, not looking at one another, for some minutes. The heavy hands of a clock were shunting themselves around the hour. Clunk, clunk. Clunk, clunk. It was nearly midnight. Eventually Victoria refilled our glasses. I could see that her hand was shaking. "Do you want me to do that, old girl?" She smiled weakly. "You shouldn't even be drinking. You're a mere boy." "I'm 22. "I suppose you are." "Come here." I patted the armchair, and she came and sat at the foot of it. It was exhilarating to be taking the lead for once. I put my hands on her shoulders. She leaned her head back against my knees. "He was right, you know," she said in the end, still facing away from me, out at the plushly appointed room. "What?" "He's right. I haven't been here. I have just been gallivanting around the world." "Of course you have. You're married to a famous cricket star. So that gives me the right to stop caring about anyone else, does it?" "You haven't done that." I put my hand on her head. "Dad will be okay. We just need to try and get him to see someone." "I'm just a really horrible person," she said. "I'm just—" "You are not just anything," I said. She gave a flat laugh. I took her left arm and turned her around gently. She shifted her weight so that she was kneeling at my feet, and our eyes met. "I mean it, Victoria." "You're delightfully partisan, old boy." "I'm not saying it because I'm your brother. I mean it. You're extraordinary." I held her face in my hands and felt my insides knotting suddenly and violently. She started to say something, drew back from it, and swallowed hard. Our lips met and brushed together, parted, then met again. This time it was a kiss. It lasted 3 seconds. Then she tore her face away, stood up, and stared at me as if we had never met. I said her name, but she began to back away. I said again, "Victoria," but she was gone. I heard her rapid steps on the staircase, and then another door shutting behind her. For a long time I sat and drank alone in the library, with the clock lurching through its uneven syllables, and the darkness outside. I didn't see Victoria again until months after the incident we never discussed. She spent Christmas Day with us, the cricketer in tow, impeccably respectful as usual of our modest home, and we got through Boxing Day at the Shillingworth Palace. I only spoke to her once that whole day. I found myself drawn for some reason to the trophy room. The vulgarity of it all was as compelling as usual, and I stood for a few moments taking in the scene. I slunk out of the room, thinking nobody would see, but there, outside the door, was my sister. "Oh, boy! Snaffling a few things?" "Of course not. I was joking, Dom." You could just hear the clunk-clunk in the room just along the hall where it had happened. Both of us pretended not to notice. "Been a tolerable enough day, hasn't it?" said Victoria, who was wearing a red and green party hat garlanded with sprigs of holly. "Not bad. Bet it's warmer in Australia, though. Rather unfestive. Better off here at Christmas. But better off there the rest of the time," I chided. "Well, it is nice. You should pop down and see us," she suggested, as if Australia were Dorset. "Tom would really like to have you visit." It all comes back to him, I thought. I hated us for talking like this, like teachers at a staff Christmas party. The cricketer appeared in the hall, and behind him Max in a horrible new brown suede jacket. Max had a cricket bat in his hand and a screwed-up ball of wrapping paper. The three of them started to play a mock game of cricket. I found a room to disappear to and waited till it was time to leave. The following March, on the weekend before St. Patrick's Day, Daly and I drove to a wedding in Somerset. It was an Irish friend of his, getting hitched to a girl from Wells. Daly was wearing a grey suit which looked as if it had last seen service sometime during the war, and a preposterous hat like a baker's cap with the Irish flag flying from its middle. Daly broke into cockles and mussels as we hit the motorway. "You are going to take that hat off before we get there, aren't you?" "Oh, no one will mind the hat. Everyone there is going to be Irish." "Who am I going to talk to once you all start getting drunk and singing your bloody songs?" "Lauren will be there. You like her." "She's not Irish. She's American." "Who?" "Lauren, the girl who makes our albums." This was a rare occasion on which I was allowed to take pictures during the entire service. The jolly modernity of proceedings was maintained by the vicar, whose sermon was short and contained a reference to Top of the Pops. The bride and groom made their vows and signed the register, then turned around into a hail of applause and cheering. My camera was following the couple through the forest of backslapping hands when a heavy thud sounded behind me. Somebody shrieked, "Help! Help!" It was the father of the bride. He'd collapsed in the front row. Before long, the ambulance sounded ominously outside, and two paramedics strapped him to an orange stretcher with an oxygen mask clamped to his mouth. At the hotel, the tables had been laid out with a buffet, and the champagne was ready in silver buckets. By the time we arrived, most of the guests were already there. The food sat untouched. The bride and groom had gone to the hospital. Eventually Daly came in, his face a little flushed, and tapped one of the microphones. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm afraid I have to pass on bad news. Roy, Mr. Langbourne, I'm afraid he died in the ambulance." I went out for some air, smoked a couple of cigarettes, drank a bottle of beer in the car park, and was waiting for the lift to take me up to my room when I heard a strange sobbing. The sound was coming from the lift, and the person responsible for it was descending towards me. I waited as it clanked to the ground. There was a longish pause before the doors juddered apart. In the lift stood a blonde woman about the same age as me. Her face was red, her nose streaming. At the sight of me, she gave a helpless splutter. "God, sorry." She lowered her face and tried to walk past me, but on instinct I took her lightly by the arm. "Who are you?" she asked. I caught the spike of an American accent. "I'm nobody. I'm a photographer." She reached for a handkerchief with an embroidered L at the corner, and I had a recollection. "Are you Lauren?" She dabbed her nose and looked up. "Yeah." "I'm Dominic. I work with Roger Daly. You do our photo albums." "Oh, all right. It would be good to meet you, but it's actually embarrassing." "Don't be embarrassed. I think you should blow your nose properly, rather than pressing it like that." She blew her nose hard and gave a rueful smile at the noise. "There goes the last of my pride. I was meant to be staying with friends tonight. They're all at the hospital now. I just got upset, and it's just so awful that he died, and anyhow, basically I just got myself upset." "You're being unduly hard on yourself," I heard myself say. She was so beautiful. I realised that I was shaking slightly. "Why don't we get a drink?" I suggested. "I can't go anywhere looking like this." "You look fine. Great, in fact." She snorted. "This is probably the worst I've looked in my life." "Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you when you do look good then." This was pretty naff, but she favoured me this time with a sensational smile. "Thank you." "Here's my room key. Why don't you go up and use my room to get yourself sorted out?" She laughed, a very light, pretty laugh. Her accent and the brisk way she picked out her words made me feel I'd been transported into some Woody Allen movie. It seems true to say that everything that was to happen between Lauren and me was written in those few moments outside the lift. I had met the second of the three women I would love the most in my life. At midnight, I met Daly in the hotel bar. "Strange day," said Daly, nodding to the barman to refill his shot glass almost immediately. "What did you get up to all evening?" "Well, actually, I was falling in love." "Ah, anyone I'd know?" "Lauren?" Daly smiled and gave a slow nod. "Makes sense." She'd grown up in Vermont and New York City with an American father and Irish mother in a quietly unhappy household. The parents split up when she was 12, and her mother brought her to England. I was always grateful to have met Lauren in spring. Summer was a great time to be hurtling ever deeper into love. There were barbecues and open-air concerts at Alexandra Palace, like the ones Victoria used to go to. They set up a drive-in cinema in Regent's Park, and Lauren, thrillingly prone to blasts of emotion, wept a barrel of tears into my shoulder when two forgettable sweethearts were parted by war. She expertly cut a jagged mouth into a pumpkin. I took her to a damp firework display in Alexandra Park, and before long she was glancing nervously at the Christmas lights on Regent Street. "Don't you like Christmas?" "Sure, I like it." "Well, why don't you come to mine?" "Because if there's one thing Mum would find more disappointing than my presence, it's my absence." "Come to my folks on Christmas Day, then, and you can see her on Boxing Day." As boys hawked the last of their felled trees outside the garage, and Daly's butcher friends took the final turkey orders, I wondered what I was getting her into. The cricketer and his little gang, Max, Victoria, Max's latest powdered girlfriend, were out in Australia for some match or other, so it would only be us and my parents. But when we arrived on Christmas Eve, Mum and Dad appeared to have raised their game. A tall, wide tree confronted us in the hall. Baubles and party lights had been hung in my room, where there was a camp bed for Lauren. Daly dropped in wearing a pair of reindeer antlers. He was well-oiled already, and proposed 4 or 5 toasts. "To Kitchen and the future Mrs. Kitchen." "Shut up, Daly." "He's only saying what we're all thinking," said Dad, a glass of punch in his hand. "You could hardly have met a lovelier lady, Dominic." The doorbell rang several times. "Carol singers!" A group of singers immediately launched into God Rest Ye Merry Gentlemen, and Lauren squealed with glee. Mrs. Linus, her face holly-red and creased in the search for breath, led the singing in a voice that overwhelmed all but one of her team. A solitary singer at the back of the group matched her for volume until the carol came squealing to an unholy climax, and I saw a figure utterly familiar to me, yet so unexpected these days that I had to catch my breath. "Victoria!" She laughed. "Old boy! Thought you'd never spot me." I fought my way through to meet her, and Victoria kissed me on the cheek in the doorway. "What the hell are you doing here?" "I decided to pop back for Christmas. Awfully dull out there. Too much cricket. Compliments of the season." Victoria's arm was still around my shoulders when I glanced back to see Lauren watching nonplussed. "Victoria," I said, This is Lauren." The two of them greeted each other and stood in an awkward embrace, and a look passed between them which I had seen countless women exchange at weddings. A look of instant appraisal. "How did you get home?" asked Dad. "We would have picked you up from the station if you—" "I cabbed it from Heathrow. Easier all round." "Don't worry, I'm rich," cried Victoria. "Someone put the kettle on." She went galloping up the stairs, and I heard a thud and creak of springs as she heaved her suitcase onto the bed. Lauren and I stood in the pocket of cold by the door. "Why did she call you old boy?" Lauren murmured. "It's just a sort of tradition," I said. "Everyone seems pretty excited to see her." "Oh, she's just larger than life." "She's very attractive." I thought briefly and involuntarily of the tortoise tattoo and tore my thoughts away from it. "No one's more attractive than you, Lauren." "You don't have to say things like that." "I'm saying it because it's true. And I'm proud you're here. I want to show you off." I folded her up in my arms and considered what I'd just said. It was true enough, and yet I felt quite strongly that it was going to be a long Christmas day. Throughout lunch, Victoria talked about the cricketer's introduction to the Pope, about the children at an Indian orphanage, about New York, Sydney, parties, cars. Dad sat nodding eagerly at everything. Mum bustled to and fro with heaped trays and plates. Lauren bent instinctively to smell the slice of Christmas pudding, and Victoria gave her a wary look as if suspecting her of rudeness. "She always does that with food," I explained. "It's kind of a habit," said Lauren, staring at her plate. "Well, Dom has a few habits as well, as I'm sure you've noticed," said Victoria. I felt my face darken and scraped my chair a little closer to Lauren's. At 9 o'clock, with Dad asleep in a chair, Lauren went upstairs for a bath, and about an hour later I realised she was already in bed. It would be the first time we'd shared a room, but it was going to be a lot less of an occasion than I'd imagined. Even as I was framing this thought, Victoria tried to interest me in a nightcap. "I'm done in, Victoria." "Good heavens, one more drink. It's Christmas bloody day." "See you in the morning." Lauren was practically asleep in my bed when I went up. I lay awake on the camp bed for a long time, until I heard the decades-old familiar sound of Victoria clumping up the stairs and closing the door of her room behind her. Lauren caught the train to Cornwall the next morning. I went home intending to get some lunch and then go out somewhere with my camera. When I came in, Victoria was gouging chunks out of a huge camembert. "Glad you're back, Dom. Mum wants to talk to us." There was an edge to her voice, even filtered through a layer of cheese. "When has Mum ever wanted to talk to us? I mean, about a specific thing?" "Exactly." Our mother came in from a walk and ushered us out into the garden. "It's ever so nice to have 2 of my 3 children back for Christmas." "You know, I began. "What did you want to talk to us about?" asked Victoria. "I just wanted... well, it's to do with Dad," she said. "He's not reporting on the football today, or very much recently." "What do you mean, very much?" asked Victoria. "Well, he does more administrative things, less of the actual writing." Victoria was staring hard at our mother. "Why? There's nothing wrong with him, Victoria. He's just he gets a bit vague. Victoria tossed her head impatiently. My God, this comes up every time and nobody does a damn thing about it. I've been saying this for years. He needs to see a doctor, Mum. I'll take him tomorrow or whenever they open. Don't have to do that, said Mum so quietly I barely heard it. I do have to do it because he won't do it himself and you won't do it and no one talks about a fucking thing in this house. Please, I'll take him. Her voice was shaking. I'll take him to the doctor. Victoria stole around beside her and took her hand, squeezing it gently. It's all right, Mum. The other day, she continued, I was just in here singing along to the wireless, not really concentrating, and he came in suddenly and said, Why do you never know the words, you silly... She mouthed the word, bitch. Why do you always sing something, something, this and that, you silly... She waved her hands in a small, hopeless gesture. He's my best friend, On the day before New Year's Eve, we went to the doctor's in Muswell Hill. Dad came out, smiling blithely, as though he had been visiting an old friend. Mum's smile was a pained one, and I felt my heart slide into my stomach, exactly as it had on Boxing Day. In the car, she summarised the situation. Dr. Etherington suspected that Dad was in the early stages of dementia. So what do you do about it? Can it just go away or get better? It can, said Mum, in a tone designed to end the conversation. Or it can take a very long time to become serious, said Dad, turning around to peer jovially at us. So by the time I've gone bonkers, something else will have carried me off instead. Well, fingers crossed for something else to carry you off then, said Victoria. It was a bold joke, even for her, and everyone, Mum included, burst out laughing. The short afternoon was ebbing away, and I was about to walk to the phone box so I could call Lauren in private, when Victoria cornered me in the hall. Dom, let's go somewhere. What? Just for the evening. I can't stand it here with all this trying to be cool about Dad. It's exhausting. Thought you'd be seeing your friends tonight or something. There's no one around, said Victoria. She swallowed. I never was as popular as you probably thought at the time. I would just love to spend a bit of time with you. Where would we go? Victoria's eyes sparked for a second. We could go to Southwold. I imagined visiting the old beach hut, listening to the sea in the dark. Go on then. Victoria whooped in excitement. We browsed a couple of unpromising B&Bs before coming to the Swan, then walked down towards the sea. Funny how things work out, said Victoria quietly. You going to tell me about you and Tom? I asked. Surprised by my own boldness, I held a cigarette out in front of me and began to click with numb fingers at my lighter. Victoria was avoiding my eye. She looked out to sea. It's fine. It's really fine. It's what happens to a lot of people, I think. He wanted kids, and I couldn't seem to get pregnant, and sex became... It was wrapped up in all this guilt. He's been quite aggressive about it at times. Not cruel, just... He talks about it as if I've something wrong with me. Which puts me off more, of course, and it's just died away a bit. Sorry, you don't need to hear this. I do need to hear it, I persevered. Because it's you. Victoria took the lighter and prodded it into life with an expert thumb. You smoke that one, I goaded, and give one to me. She shook her head. Seriously, I need to give it up. Tom's forever lecturing me. Sounds like you have more respect for Tom's opinions than your own. Victoria raised her eyebrows. God, you really do hate him, don't you? I don't hate him, I said, my face suddenly warm. I just feel like you shouldn't be trying to keep anyone else happy. Dom, pretty much everyone in the world does everything to keep someone else happy. That, I said, is the least Victoria Kitchen thing I've ever heard. I'm not Victoria Kitchen anymore, am I? Obviously not. She stared at me, then turned and walked rapidly back up the beach. I struggled to keep pace with her, my feet sinking into the softer sand as we reached the top. Victoria, hey, I'm sorry. We had stopped next to the old beach hut. On a whim, she tried the door, but it was locked. Both slightly out of breath, we turned and surveyed the scene. There was nobody anywhere. Down the path, the caravan park where we used to stay would be deserted too on this strange night of the year. Sorry. Give me the fag, she said, her eyes hard. You don't have to smoke it, just to... She snatched the cigarette and smoked the remainder with aplomb, taking an in-breath which seemed to last a whole minute, and then sending a spiral of smoke up into the cold air. You didn't have to do that. I'm prepared to smoke just one fag, she said, to prove my worth to you. This made me cough. It felt as if our natural hierarchy had been inverted. I just think, I said. Well, you said it yourself. You only live once. Some people not even that. She smiled, and then shivered as the wind surged up and rattled the doors of the huts. Instinctively, I grabbed her and held her close. She smelled of gin and chips, peaches and cigarettes. Come on, let's get back. The man behind the desk was asleep. The clock above him showed midnight. Victoria went into the bathroom. There was a double bed and a single. I lay on the bigger one, looking up at the ceiling's gnarled beams. The bathroom door was pushed open. Victoria was in her nightie, a towel tucked under her arm. I rolled onto my side to avoid seeing her. Excuse my semi-nakedness. I see you've commandeered the double bed. She sat on the edge of the bed and rummaged in her case. Budge up. I glimpsed through the fluttering folds of her nightie, the tortoise tattoo, the green and brown, somewhat dulled by the years. Her eye followed mine, and for a moment we both stared at the small motif on her thigh. He's a bit smaller than I remember. I think you'll find that it's my thighs are a bit fatter than you remember, said Victoria. She settled back against the pillows and pulled the cover over us. It's bloody freezing. You're not going to banish me to the other bed, are you? I grunted and moved as far away from her as I could. We lay there, side by side, like an old couple, not touching. I was conscious of nothing but that familiar knot, and the attempt to deny that it was there, which felt as if it were consuming every ounce of effort in my body. You all right, Domino? Oh, I'm fine. Do you not want me in here with you? It's fine. Her foot brushed comfortingly against mine. Had she somehow forgotten what happened in the Shillingworth's library that night? Just tired, and I was thinking about Dad, and I've had too much to drink. Her arm settled around my back, and we lay there in the dark. Victoria fell asleep. Her shallow breaths tickled like a light wind at my back, and her arm still lay round me. Eventually, the last morning of 1975 would settle over the still streets outside. Victoria would disappear once more, perhaps for months or the whole year, and I would try even harder than ever to forget what I feared I felt for her. For the anniversary of our first meeting, I took Lauren to Paris. On the second night, we went to a restaurant on the Seine. The weather was warm and the river with its low bridges melted artfully into the dusk. Lauren and I held hands across the table. It's been the most unbelievable year, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for being in that lift. Thanks for not running away when I came out looking like a mad witch. There was a disturbance at the table to our right. A man was on one knee, the woman was in tears. It was a successful proposal. The man sprang to his feet, and the two of them shared a long kiss. Lucky girl, murmured Lauren. I took a gulp of velvety red, looked at Lauren's face, saw the past year of bliss as if it had all occurred on a single day, and felt caught up in an unstoppable tide. I dropped onto one knee. I'm not being outdone, I said. Lauren, will you marry me? She gaped at me. Are you serious? Marry me. Is it a horrible cliché If I say I'm the happiest girl in the world, she whispered into my ear as we slunk back to the hotel along the river. Were you planning it all along? I think I was planning it from the second you stepped out of the lift. We were married in October in my parents' church with a beaming Daly by my side as best man. There was a dinner. Daly rolled out a sparkling compendium of best man gags hoarded over the years, and a ceilidh band, friends of Lauren's mother, whirled everyone into a dance. I thudded between dancing groups, whiskey in hand, being slapped on the back and having witticisms yelled in my ear. My hand was squeezed by people I hardly recognised. Someone yelled that I'd done well for myself. The dances seemed endless, the melodies doubling back on themselves like records that kept jumping back to the start. I felt arms around my neck and spun to face Victoria. What a day, Domo! Her forehead was damp, and disarranged strands of hair poked from the brim of her hat. Her dress was green and gold and brown. Yeah, what a day! She leaned in and kissed me on the lips. It must have seemed to everyone else a tipsy, innocent gesture between siblings. Victoria took a step back, and her eyes scorched mine with a look so full of emotion that I experienced it almost as a slap in the face. She turned and made her way through a crowd which parted, as ever, in front of her. Then Daly took hold of my arm and dragged me back into a circle of jostling, perspiring dancers. The music began its gallop again. Lauren was by my side, and the preceding few moments, like all such moments with Victoria, might never have happened. On a balcony in Rome during the honeymoon, with traffic horns blaring below and an evening sky of blood orange, Lauren told me she was pregnant. After growing up feeling that I was always last to catch up with the ball, now I had planted both my feet solidly in the world. Whatever I might have felt that was not right, there would simply be no space for it anymore. Lauren spent the long hours of labour under a strip light which flickered on and off. Eventually, baby Elizabeth was handed to me. Lauren's face was a mask of sweat and tears as she squinted at our daughter. "Isn't she beautiful? Isn't she the most beautiful thing?" She was smaller, messier, more rumpled than I ever imagined babies were. "She is. She certainly is." The worst is over now, I thought. The hard part is over. As I look back, it is safe to say this is one of the least accurate thoughts ever to have entered my head. I still can't quite account for the 2 or 3 years that saw Elizabeth struggle from birth to infancy to recognisable personhood. How can all those nights of broken sleep, the anguished conversations, the mess, add up to 2 or 3 years of my life? By 1980, Victoria and the cricketer had moved back to England full-time, and sometimes Victoria would come round to see her niece. On these occasions, Lauren would try to conceal her unsteady moods with a forced cheer, which I found almost more draining than its opposite. She laughed too loudly at everything, praised Victoria's appearance with compliments really meant as bitter remarks on her own misfortune. "Oh, it must be great to shop at places like that. Wow, I wish I had time to do my hair like that." Victoria would reply with counter-compliments about our cosy home, our beautiful daughter, which could not help sounding like consolation prizes. One Sunday, the parting hug between Lauren and Victoria was so wooden that I had to follow Victoria out to say goodbye properly. "Look, I'm sorry about Lauren. It's all right, Dom. She doesn't have to like me. It's not that. She doesn't just behave this way with you. She's really struggling with everything at the moment. She could be depressed. Do you know about postnatal depression? But it's been 3 years. It can last for ages. She should speak to someone. We glanced involuntarily back to see Lauren watching us through the window. "I better go inside. Thanks for coming." She leaned in for me to kiss her on the cheek, but I didn't dare. 3 weeks later, I came back from a wedding. My heart was warming at the thought of Lauren. It was still early, Elizabeth might be asleep, and we could spend some quiet hours together. But she was waiting at the door, eyes glittering with outrage, a day-long grievance clenched in her jaw. "Welcome home, darling." "What's the matter?" "Oh, nothing. Nothing can be the matter, because it's to do with Victoria, and everyone loves Victoria, so if I take offence, I must be crazy." I tried to touch her, but she edged away. "What?" She produced a postcard, as if it were a dagger. "With love from the Isle of Wight." With clammy hands, I turned the postcard over and felt my frisking heart thud to a halt. "Was just thinking some more about Elle. Tom knows an amazing guy on Harley Street. Expensive, but I would think we could pull some strings. Think about it. Just want to help. V. Kiss, kiss." I looked between the card and Lauren's indignant face. "I'm sorry. She has no right to poke her nose in." "Obviously she thinks she has a right, because obviously someone has told her that I'm whining." "It's not a case of whining. Anyone can see you're unhappy." "Right. I'm unhappy because I live in a tiny little house with a screaming 3-year-old and a husband who's never there, so I must be as crazy as Sylvia fucking Plath. If Victoria says so, then why not?" "This is not about Victoria. I love you, and I don't want you to be miserable." She dropped her eyes, disarmed for a second. "Dominic, I am not going to feel better about my life by spending money we don't have so someone can tell me to work through my issues." Elizabeth cried out in the nursery. Lauren turned and went, head bowed, to the door. Dad, who had been getting worse for some time, was examined by Dr. Etherington once more in early December. At the other end of a long Christmas, Max called us for a council of war at the Shillingworth mansion. I drove down there after a day taking pictures at a computing awards ceremony. Max and Victoria were drinking whisky side by side in their armchairs. Victoria reached for a glass and poured me a huge measure. "So, I've already been through this with Victoria. As we all know, Dad needs to be in full-time care. The other thing is we obviously need to keep an eye on Mum. This is going to be very tough for her." "Of course," I muttered. "Right, well, there's not a lot more to say. Let's finish this, shall we?" He sloshed out the whisky. "I did sort of have another motive for getting you both here." He wiped his mouth and broke into a wolfish grin. "Noni and I are getting married." Victoria clapped her hands. "Hooray! When?" "Pretty soon." "Can I help her choose the dress?" asked Victoria, grabbing his arm. "Can I decorate the venue?" "You'll be guest of honour for our sins." He coughed and glanced up at me. "And you and your wife are well and truly invited, of course?" "Well, I would think he'd be taking the photos," said Victoria. He cleared his throat. "Actually, a friend of Noni's is a bit of a snapper. She's sort of asked him if he's available." "One of those awkward things," Max conceded. "But Dominic, you're more than welcome to take a few of your own." "This is bollocks." Victoria's mouth was open. "Are you honestly telling me you're not going to get your own brother to take your wedding shots?" "It's fine," I said, "if he wants to get an amateur to do it." "Having seen you at work," said Max with his trademark grin, "I'm not entirely sure you should be calling someone else an amateur." Fury flooded my brain, and I shot to my feet. Victoria grabbed me by the arm. "Hey, calm down." "Don't tell me to fucking calm down." "Max, you're in the wrong," said Victoria. "Apologise." "I don't give a shit about taking your photos," I said. "There's not a lens wide enough for your girlfriend's teeth." Victoria bit her lip, trying to lock up a laugh, but it curled its way out of her mouth. "You should probably take that back, Dom." "Sorry," I said. "I meant there's not a lens wide enough for your fiancé's teeth." Victoria snorted and spluttered helplessly, and Max laid his glass down hard on the table. "I think I'll be off now," he said. "I'll get on the phone to the care home in the morning." Unless, Dominic, you'd like to do it so that you can be involved. Piss off, Max, said Victoria. We watched him leave the room and heard his footsteps in the hall. I overreacted, I said. I shouldn't be so sensitive. You've got every right. She came and sat on the arm of the chair. Anyway, his loss. You're a great photographer. You don't have to say that. You are. God, I should hire you to do pictures of me. You should see some of the hideous ones they print. Got a camera in the car? Victoria looked at me. I didn't mean now, necessarily. We could, though. I could just do some shots and see how they come out. She giggled. I've got a couple of outfits in the room upstairs. The room they keep for me. Victoria led us up the stairs to the room they kept for her. It was high-ceilinged, dominated by a four-poster bed, which was immaculately made up and heaped with plump pillows. Victoria opened a huge oak wardrobe to reveal a rail of dangling dresses. She held out a deep blue cocktail dress. What about this? Bit short? Let's try it. She took a step away from me and began to undress. I turned and looked out of the window, breathing as steadily as I could. I heard a little sigh as a zip caught her fingers. Every part of me was tense. Against what I thought was my will, I turned around and looked at her. She stood in her black underwear against the ice-white walls. My eyes went to the fading tattoo, which was beginning to look like some minor blemish, and then were arrested by hers. She looked at me, amused. Impulsively, I took hold of the camera and snapped her. Ah, you were sizing me up for a photo. For a second I thought you were just staring at my breasts. Sorry, I don't know. I just wanted to look. It felt good to have said it. Victoria sat down on the bed. I stood, quite at a loss. Glancing between her and the camera, I waited for her to speak. I'm sorry, I said again. I shouldn't be seeing you like this, in this way. I don't know what you think of me. She wet her lips with her tongue and motioned me to pass her a cigarette. The truth is, O.B., I rather like being looked at. It's a long time since anyone looked at me with any sort of desire. You come to miss it after a while. I'm not the person who should be desiring you. No, well, hard to say what anyone should be doing, isn't it? I sank down next to her on the bed. My hand brushed against hers on the duvet. I've always felt so comfortable with you. You're my brother. Her eyes twinkled darkly for a moment. I never thought twice about, even when we kissed. In the library? Well, we were drunk, we were upset. I didn't think it mattered. And now? It's not as if we're ever going to do anything, she said in the end. We're brother and sister, for God's sake. I saw you naked the day you were born. As you've said before, so you still owe me one. Looking me in the eyes, she unfastened her bra and placed it on the bedspread as if it were an object of no importance. Her breasts, larger and heavier than I imagined, swung in front of my eyes. I caught my breath. I know, she said. I've let myself go. That's not what I was thinking. I wanted to touch her so desperately. I slid my hand across and rested it on her bare knee. My hand went out towards her. Then my heart froze as the Spanish maid Conchita knocked on the door, pushing it open as she did so. Shit, said Victoria. I leapt from the bed and threw myself against the door. Wait a minute, I shouted, shoving the door so that Conchita was thrown back out with it. Give us a minute. I'm doing some photographs, I said. He's got the camera set up just behind the door, Victoria called. You'll knock it over. Conchita muttered something in Spanish. Victoria had covered herself. Sorry about that, I called. Come in. I opened the door. She walked in, hand on hip, a duster poking out of the other hand. She looked hard at each of us. Just saying I finish now, she said. Us too, said Victoria with a pleasant smile. You were just leaving, weren't you, Dominic? I was, I muttered, and started to pack the handheld into the case. Conchita gave me one more look and went on her way. Victoria and I scarcely glanced at each other as I collected my things. We descended the staircase with unconvincing nonchalance and said goodbye in the grand doorway. She was going to stay the night. As for me, I had to return to my real life, as if that was the only world that existed, and what had transpired in the Shillingworth house had once again been a lurid dream. It was bonfire night when Dad died. He had left his life, really, some months before, and yet had to keep living it for a while longer. As I took the phone call from Max, the shrieks and bangs of fireworks were echoing from Alexandra Palace. Churchill's funeral, that day in the 60s, had seemed interminable. Dad's was over in a matter of moments. To everyone's surprise, Mum gave a speech. She was wearing a hat which he had bought her on their first trip abroad 45 years before. She said that Dad had always been the person who made her look forward to the next day, and that she could never hear the name Harry without feeling a little flutter of excitement. The next spring, Daly and I were hired for a wedding in the chapel of a Scottish castle. A frog-faced millionaire, the father of the bride, was paying for us to get the sleeper train up from King's Cross. Daly was already in our cramped cabin, sitting on the edge of the lower bunk. He poured me a whisky. The authorities and I went in one of these on our honeymoon. Daly, have you ever had a really big row? I mean, well, something where you thought the marriage might end? I did once think that she might be seeing someone else, he said quietly. Did you ever ask her about it? I did once, and she said there was nothing to worry about, and that was the end of it. Did you ever think, if there was anything going on, you'd be better off not knowing? No, said Daly immediately. If there was anything going on, I would need to know, and the marriage would have to end. As I've said before, there are certain things you can't do. Our train glided on into the night. When I thought he was asleep, Daly suddenly said, You know, if there's anything you want to tell me, I'd not repeat it to anyone. I wouldn't be scared of you repeating it, I said. I'd be scared of your judgment. He laughed. My judgment? I'm not God, fortunately. But you do have high moral standards. It doesn't mean I think everyone should do as I say. For a few clanks of the engines, I thought about telling Daly everything. Well, I'll bear that in mind if I ever do have a dark secret, I said at last. But rest assured, the only other woman I've ever loved is Victoria. Daly's soft laugh rose from the lower bunk. I think that's safe enough. The bride had a long list of photos she wanted, with her brother, arm in arm with her bridesmaids, in front of the wedding car with her father and the coat-tailed chauffeur. The car was an old black Bentley. One of these wouldn't come cheap, I said, purely to make conversation as I sized up the shot. It didn't, smirked the father of the bride, and I flushed, realising it was his own car. The number plate didn't make it any cheaper either. He pointed out the personalised plate, BDR 34, his initials. Brigadoon, said Daly. What? Barked the older man suspiciously. The letters are in the wrong order, I said to Daly. And you can't have a proper noun. It's just a game, I explained to the car's owner. We try to form words from the... Bombardier, said a voice right behind me. I swung around and almost fell into my sister's arms. She was in an enormous black frock coat and a hat the shape of a fruit bowl. She looked like some eccentric aunt. What are you doing here? I'm a friend of the Ricketses. Thanks to Tom's sterling work for Surrey, she said. Is Tom here? No, I'm on my own. The old man cleared his throat impatiently. Listen, I said, I'll catch up with you at the wedding breakfast. But we were seated at tables so far apart they could have been in different countries. During the speeches, the band had set up, and before long the guests were scurrying here and there, colliding, grabbing one another. Sweaty men took the arms of blushing teenage girls. Stockbrokers leered at minor aristocrats. Daly, who would no more join in with a dance than he would walk across a frozen lake, took care of the photographs. I edged my way out of the room and walked down the wide, echoing corridor until I could push open a door and feel cold air on my face. I got out a cigarette, searched my pockets in vain for a lighter. I'd left it on our table, I realised, and swore out loud. When I looked up, Victoria was standing over me, a lit match in her hand. Perhaps I can help. She perched down beside me. She was clad in an astonishing dress, scarlet and royal blue, low-cut and stopping at the knee. She caught my eye and grinned. Yep, totally inappropriate for a wedding, I agree, and for the season, and for life in general. Have you ever done anything that was appropriate? She gripped my arm suddenly. Speaking of which, let's get out of here. Well, where would we go? Victoria cocked her thumb. I stayed here last night. There's a pub round the corner. They do food. We've just had a wedding breakfast. It was pathetic, said Victoria. I want a great big chunk of meat covered in a blanket of cheese, she said. It was after midnight as we walked, arm in arm, back through the grounds of the castle. The celebrations were finally fizzling out in the hall. We walked along in silence for a moment. Where are you staying, old boy? I would like to use your bathroom. I sat on the bed, leaned back queasily against the many pillows, and tried to tell myself everything was quite all right. This is a lot nicer than mine, Victoria called from the bathroom. I could already hear water pouring into the tub. Don't mind if I have a bath, do you? And are we going to continue chatting through the door, or are you going to be a gentleman and come in here? All right, I said. And this, perhaps, was the moment when I resigned myself finally to having lost control of my life. All right, I'm coming. Victoria was already lounging in the bath, 1 foot on each tap. The water came up just above the level of her breasts. Her leg rose out of the water. She draped it over the edge of the bath. The green and brown of the tortoise had faded over 2 decades to a uniform sand yellow. I remember thinking it was the most shocking secret in the world, that tattoo, I said. At the time it was shocking. Victoria ran her wet hands over her face. That was as close as I got to being a rebel. The tattoo, a bit of bad sex, and being sick in the hall once with a hangover. And introducing me to booze. And introducing you to booze when you were, what, 12? 13? 13. I should probably have looked after you a bit better. I've told you, I said. You might as well do it while you can. How far does that philosophy extend, old boy? What do you mean, I asked. My heart was lashing against the walls of my chest. We looked at each other in silence. Victoria's brown eyes had an intensity I had never seen before, will perhaps never see again. She leaned forward, her breasts rising out of the water, and yanked the plug out. Get into bed, she said, standing up in front of me. I went into the bedroom, put out all the lights, and lay with my eyes shut, my brain a void. I felt her get into the bed next to me, her skin still damp. We don't have to do anything, she whispered, and we will never mention it again. It will never have happened. In the morning I will have gone, okay? I turned and took her in my arms. Her face moved in towards mine, and I felt my whole body scream like a firework. I shut my eyes, shut my brain. She could be anybody. As she sighed and took my weight on top of her, I clung on to these thoughts and let myself topple over the precipice. When I woke, it was light outside. Birds were singing. Victoria was gone. There is a word for what we did, but I never use it in my head. It is a word that pops up in seedy internet jokes, a word that can subdue a room. In a world where most people think what they like, it is the one unthinkable thing. My desires had long been unthinkable to myself. Now my actions were. I had little choice, though, but to go on. That afternoon, Lauren, Elizabeth and I strolled to the park to see the ducks as if it were just any Sunday. I tucked Elizabeth into bed, kissed her forehead, and went to bed with Lauren. Much as I longed to speak to Victoria, for 3 weeks there was no contact between us at all. After another week, however, I felt I had no choice. I waited until the house was empty and dialed her number. I was ready to greet the cricketer in a jovial manner and ask casually as to his wife's availability. Gradually, as the tones went by, I resigned myself to getting no answer. Then, her wary voice. "Hello?" "Victoria, it's me." "Who is this?" "Me, it's Dominic. The phone was put down. By following the urge as I had sealed myself off from Victoria. No matter that she had followed it with me, she had made her decision, and I was alone now. Around the 3-year mark of our separation, I found myself taking pictures at a jazz and dinner fundraiser at the Savoy. By now, without ever really accepting it, I had accustomed myself to the idea that my sister and I were strangers. I was trying to herd some hee-hawing businessmen into a group photo when I saw Victoria and the cricketer taking their seats at a table. My eyes met Victoria's. She blinked and turned away. As always, it was hard to miss her. She had on a floor-length dress, fiery red. She wore no hat. When at last she left the hall, I followed her into a cloakroom where an attendant presided over rail upon rail of dark coats. I watched as she lit a cigarette and swung round. Her face twisted as she saw me, but at last she spoke. "Why are you following me?" It felt like something Max might have asked me decades ago. "Look," I said, "I know that you—" "Not here," she hissed. "I know you don't want to discuss it," I began again. "I think it's best if I pretend I don't even know what you're talking about," she said, her eyes glinting ferociously at me. "Don't you?" "Please." I reached out to touch her sleeve, but she shrank away. "All I want is, well, just to know if you're going to keep this up forever." "What else do you suggest I do, Dominic?" "Old girl, don't call me that," she snapped and began to walk away. "Just please stop ignoring me," I called after her. "All right, Jesus, don't make a scene." With a sigh, she came back towards me, arms folded across her chest. "Look, I'm sorry for the way things are now," she said. "You understand why, and you understand I've got little choice but to keep going." "It's not as if it was just my fault," I said. "You did actually say that it wouldn't matter, and that I have to get back to Tom." From that night on, she never cut me dead again. But if anything, what replaced her hostility was worse. Grudging eye contact at family occasions, polite inquiries about Elizabeth, a formally phrased invitation to drinks at the Shillingworths. On and on through those years, I carried the knowledge that I had lost my favourite person and could never dream of telling anyone. "7 years to the day after the morning I woke to find Victoria gone, I sat in a packed church in West London watching the christening of Hugh and Charlotte, Max and Noni's twins, their 3rd and 4th children. In the crush to get out of the church door before being spoken to by the vicar, I brushed against Victoria so closely I could smell peaches, but we didn't make eye contact. I glanced back a moment later in the churchyard to see her embracing some former cricketer. Beth, her eyebrows arched, followed my gaze. Have you and Toria fallen out? When I was a kid, she used to be round all the time. I grinned, in spite of myself. Are you not a kid anymore? I'm 15, and please answer my question. She's very busy. She used to be so, always into talking to me, and now she's just kind of polite. And the way she looks at you, she's constantly giving you evils. Giving me what? Giving you evils, Dad. Beth sighed. Giving you the evil eye? I'm trying to think of a more old-fashioned way of phrasing it. All right. Between you and me, yes, Victoria and I fell out quite badly. We don't really speak now. Fascinating. Well, there you have it. Okay, so what did you do to her? Nothing. Did she do something to you? No, it's just, sometimes things go wrong in a family. Beth grimaced. Does anything ever go right in a family? There was meant to be a recession, and marriage was meant to be an outdated idea, and nobody was meant to believe in God anymore. But weddings went on. In Croydon, we were listening to the self-penned vows of the pink young couple when Daly gave me a nudge and whispered, "Recognise her parents?" "No, who?" "I'm pretty sure we did their wedding, 70s. It was a beautiful, dark-haired couple who had been among our first customers. They glowed with a time-refined version of the lustre I remembered from 20 years ago, as their daughter joined hands with her good-looking Pakistani groom. Christ, I need a drink. Daly clucked his tongue. When have you not needed a drink? I felt my ears burning, the blood rush of someone defending his right to be in the wrong. It was a fair, if needling, point. It seemed like barely a fortnight after my nephew and niece's christening that we were on our way to celebrate their second birthday at the Shillingworths. I found an unguarded bottle of wine and spent a pleasant hour with it. As I poured the dregs into my glass, I caught sight of Beth at the edge of the room. I saw her glance around, pour herself a generous measure from a bottle of schnapps, and down it in 3 gulps. That's my girl, I thought, and shuffled over to her. Sorry about this. We'll go soon. Sorry about what? This whole thing. Bit of a drag. A drag? She shook her head. Has anyone said that since 1969? Her eyes swam across the room to the doorway, where Rowley, my brother's 35-year-old assistant, was standing with his arms folded and a strange, thoughtful expression on his face. I saw him pretend to be looking at a vase on a shelf and then allow his eyes to creep over to Beth. My 18-year-old daughter and he stared at each other across the room. Then he left, and she, after a few moments' calculated pause, went after him. I watched them go, recovering my breath only after they had disappeared. Even then it was uneasy. I made for the trophy room. There was quiet. I sank down into the armchair and thought about Beth in the arms of the shiny-faced man twice her age. The door gave its showman's creak again, a hesitation, and then the door was pushed open. It was Victoria. Her hair was streaked with grey, and for the first time ever I saw her as a middle-aged woman, a woman past her best. The moment soon passed, and I looked at her once more with the usual emotions. Should have known I'd find you here. Why would you want to find me? She coughed. Look, Mum is 75 next month, you know that. Her mouth relaxed into a half-smile. Did you know there's a new gentleman on the scene? She's been seeing a man called Ernie from the pub. That's great, I said. At least, is it great? I guess it is. I guess it is too, said Victoria. Look, here's the thing. I'd like to take her and Ernie to Southwold for her 75th, but of course you can't drive and you'd like me to do it. She nodded. Max is going to be away. Great, said I. So I'll give you a call about the details. We looked at each other with the awkwardness of people who had only been introduced that afternoon. Great, she said, and closed the door. Ernie was a white-haired gentleman who had very nearly been killed while parachuting into Germany as an 18-year-old. A bullet entered his chest and flew out of his back, missing all the big guns in the middle. As a result, he had lived the rest of his life as if it were a bonus. Mum rolled her eyes at everything he said and gave him a series of her small smiles. "Dad used to love it here," said Mum, looking at the flattened sand by the entrance to the hut. "I can just see him now, sitting here with those silly shorts of his." We all pictured him for a moment. "Perhaps we should have a cup of tea," Mum said, looking down towards the pier. "Why don't you two go down?" Victoria suggested. "Dom and I can join you in a little bit." "Oh, we don't want to break up the gang," said Ernie, oblivious to any nuance in the conversation. "Let's all—" "Lovely," said Mum, taking his hand with an ease which surprised me. "Come on, Ernie. We'll leave the kids alone for a bit." "I bet they won't even want a proper dinner. Mum eats less than the tortoise these days. She's practically disappeared." "We could go to the chip shop." She grimaced. "I'm not sure how much nostalgia I can take." "So why are we here?" Victoria leaned back against the side of the beach hut and looked right at me. "Old boy, I have something to tell you. I have cancer, unfortunately." "What?" "Lung cancer." "What do you mean?" "Well, very much what I say, really. Lung cancer." She reached an arm out to steady me, and I let my weight slump against the side of the hut. Her arm stayed on mine. Given the 30-plus years of smoking, the specialist said it was something of a wonder it had taken this long. I couldn't reply. "It's so tiny," she said. "That's the annoying thing. It's preposterous that you can be killed by a thing that looks—" "You're not going to be killed by it," I said, gripping her hand. "You're not." "Well, the good news is that thanks to cricket money, the best specialists in the UK, the world and Mars are on the case. But the truth is, being the best ones, they tend not to fudge things. So they're quite upfront about my chances, which are 50-50. Well, that's something. 50-50 of getting through to this time next year. But the long and short of it, old boy, is that I'm probably going to die. Apart from Tom, you're the first person to know." "What about Max?" "You were always my favourite, and I'm well aware that things happened between us which, you know, I reacted badly. I didn't know what to do. But now none of it seems important. All that's important is that I'm alive for the moment, and..." Our fingers were locked together. Hers were icy to the touch. "Come on," she said. "Let's get chips." It was 11 at night by the time I had dropped Ernie off at his bungalow, Mum and Victoria at Park Street. When Victoria and I hugged goodbye in the doorway, she held on for a long time. I noticed again how cold her hands were. The streaks of grey in her hair seemed more pronounced. Perhaps the day of sunshine had brought them out. Within 6 weeks she would start chemotherapy and her hair would be shaved off. Lauren had gone to bed, but there was a note on the kitchen table. "Welcome home. Beth out with boyfriend. Food in oven." It was well after 2 when Beth came in. I was sitting at the kitchen table, an empty bottle in front of me. After her keys had rattled in the door, there was a lengthy exchange of whispered goodbyes. I tried to force back my irritation as finally she came clumping into the kitchen, blinking in surprise to find me there. "What sort of time is this?" "Can you not tell the time, Dad?" "Do you think 2:30 is an acceptable time to be coming home from a date with someone twice your age?" "What the fuck has his age got to do with the time that I'm allowed to come back?" "Do you have to use that kind of language?" "Do you have to be that much of a cliché of a dad?" I blocked her way as she tried to leave. "That man is not the right person for you to be with," I hissed into her face. "He's 35. 36, actually. He wants to sleep with you and take advantage of you, and then he'll leave you to deal with it." Beth rolled her eyes theatrically. "How the hell do you know what he wants?" "I am your father. Like it or not, I do not want to see you going out with someone practically as old as me. You don't want to see me happy, is what you mean. Oh, don't be such a teenager. You better get used to it, she said, because me and Rowley are going to see each other, whatever anyone thinks about it. Daly and I were driving back from a wedding with the radio on. The IRA was thinking of calling off its current ceasefire. Stupid bastards, muttered Daly, leaving the steering wheel more or less to its own devices as he gestured out of the window. Some people will never let it go, eh? You need to get in the other lane. You know, the world is safer than it's probably ever been. No Berlin Wall, no need for bloody wars. But some people, they don't know what to do unless they're fighting. You could say all this while still keeping your hands on the wheel, you know? Or you could drive, said Daly, but you can't because of the drink. My bladder ached. Daly, can we stop somewhere? We were stopped for half an hour back there. Yeah, in the middle of the road. There's no services now for 20 miles. You'll have to wait. I'll piss in your car. It's your car, he said, looking straight ahead. Oh, yeah. But there was no glint of fun in his voice. I left it for half an hour before trying again to puncture the silence. Look, I'm sorry, all right? I got drunk. You don't say. I know it was unprofessional. The car crunched as his large hands wrestled with the gear stick. You're bloody right it was unprofessional, he said at last. That's putting it mildly. Turning up at weddings like we're a pair of pikeys, getting pissed, having fights, climbing into bed. You don't look unprofessional, just me. I don't know if you've noticed these past 25 years, but we actually work as a team. I've had a hard time. I felt like crying. Victoria. I know, Dom, I know, but before that you got drunk because of not being able to communicate with Beth, and before that it was your marriage, and before that I don't know, because it was a Wednesday or something. He gestured in exasperation with both hands. We veered towards a parallel car, and the two vehicles nearly scraped together for a second, like two bodies on a dance floor. Careful. Don't tell me to be careful, said Daly, looking me in the face. You always seem to have this idea that you're the first guy in the world to ever have a problem, and it's somehow too much for an ordinary person to grasp. Because it is. His large head turned to look at me. How the hell am I supposed to help you, Dom, if you won't put your hands on the bloody wheel? I lunged across at him. He backed away. There was a screech and a blare of horns, and then an explosion. That's the last thing I remember thinking. Nobody tells you this about a high-speed car crash. How terrifyingly loud it is. Like a bomb going off. The next thing I remember thinking was that I had been lucky not to die, and luckier still not to have been seriously hurt. Daly was in a somewhat worse state. A couple of breaks, a handful of what the nurse breezily referred to as internal knocks. But nothing permanent? Nothing permanent. I lay quietly in my bed, reflecting on what seemed a fresh start, a chance to give up drinking, to concentrate on Beth and Lauren and all that was ahead, to be a better colleague, husband, father, all of it. It was only when I went to see Daly on the third day that the price of my reprieve was revealed. He rubbed his face. Look, Dom, this isn't such a pleasant subject, so I'll be short about it. I don't think you and I will be working together again. He looked at me with a regret and affection which made me so uncomfortable that I had to stand up. Daly. Roger, I know you're angry. I know it's my fault, but please don't start talking like this. It's been a long time. We're an incredible team. We were, yes. Have a think about it, Roger. I've had a think about it, Dom. He cleared his throat and looked away as I left the ward. It was true, what Victoria had said. In the end, no matter who you blame, your life is your own business. It adds up to what you make it. Beth was going away to university in Newcastle. Her subject was film and television studies. Sure you're up to it? I asked cheerfully. It can be tough work having to go to the pictures. Beth's face was like granite. That's exactly what I expected you to say. It was only a joke, I said. I'm really proud that you... Whatever. I asked meekly whether she would be wanting a lift to Newcastle. Rowley's driving me. Lauren made lunch in the kitchen. My wife stood at the sink, tossing salad in a bowl. "I just can't get to like him," I said. "Who?" "No, me neither. But, young love. It doesn't seem right." Lauren sat down opposite me. "Come on, admit it. The age gap, the what?" "His motives. I don't trust him." "But, who are we to ask what's natural in a relationship? I know things have been hard at times between us and you've found your solutions. And, that's okay. We're okay. I don't care what you've done." "I always loved you," I said. I know I was always number one. If I didn't think that, I would have been out of here years ago." My stomach twisted uneasily. Of course she had been number one, if you discounted the love which could never be acknowledged, and perhaps that was enough. But it was a painful sensation to be forgiven for a sin she considered serious enough to talk about like this, when the true crime was so much worse. In March of the next year, a couple of weeks before Beth was due home for Easter, the doorbell rang one Friday night. I opened the door to see Beth, hand in hand with Rowley. I ushered them in. Rowley cleared his throat a number of times. To cut to the chase, I'm here because I want to ask for your daughter's, as it were, hand in marriage. Lauren and I looked at each other. Beth looked at the ground. "Bit of a formality, I suppose," said Rowley, "but we wanted to do things by the book." "Beth?" asked Lauren. "Is this what you—" "Yeah. You're not 19 yet. I mean, it seems a bit—" "It's what I want," Beth confirmed, almost as if speaking under hypnosis. Lauren and I looked at each other again. What was there to say? "Well, I won't stand in your way," I said. Rowley grinned and grabbed my hand with an enthusiasm he had never shown before. "Good man," he said. "Wow," said Lauren. Wow, you'll be engaged." Rowley nodded approvingly. "You've either met the right person or you haven't. If you have, why wait?" "Why indeed," I said faintly. The radio prattled on in the kitchen, as it had the night we brought Beth home from the hospital, a scrunched scrap of a person in a basket. "So," I said, "have you thought about a wedding photographer?" One afternoon in early October, I was summoned to the Shillingworth place. I'd seen Victoria now and then, and we spoke on the phone a lot, though our outings had become less frequent. There had been no shocks, no obvious worsening of the state of affairs, but today Conchita laid a warning hand on my arm as I arrived. Not so good. I plodded up the stairs with lead in my legs. Victoria was sitting on the bed in a pair of blue satin pyjamas that looked 3 sizes too big. She had withered in the week since I last saw her. Victoria folded her arms across her flattened chest. "Oh boy, I have 2 important things to say to you this evening. Both of them are going to be rather difficult. Can't see what can be more difficult than what's already happened." "That's the spirit. Right. What's first? The rather complicated one or the very simple one?" "Complicated, naturally." "All right. Well, I was overseeing Mum the other day. Ernie came and picked me up. The 2 of them really seem to be tight as you like. Anyway, so we were talking about Beth getting married, and about regrets and unfinished business. But we somehow got onto her and Dad." She took another drink of water. "She let slip. Well, no, it wasn't a matter of letting slip. She seemed quite anxious to tell me. She told me that in the early days of the war, Dad got discharged with, something like shell shock. He went a bit batty out there, was the way she put it. So his mental health remained something they could never discuss. It was a source of shame. That's why him cracking up was ignored for so long. I had to read between the lines a bit, but in short, I think their relationship became a bit of a no-sex zone for a while. He was still ashamed, whatever, So they stopped. It happened in my marriage, it happened in yours. They just kept living without. One weekend, he went up to Manchester to cover some match. She slept with someone else. The arrangement, well, maybe arrangement is too strong a word, but it happened several times. She got pregnant. It was one of those huge truths which are no sooner out in the open than they feel permanent and familiar. But it was no less astounding for that. The moment was a long one. I had to say it out loud to make it more real. Dad wasn't your father? No. So you and I? Yes. Half-brother, half-sister. There was nothing and everything to say. My brain was frothing as if hundreds of fish, each one a question, had been tipped into water. It was the obvious one which came to the surface first. Why the hell didn't she ever say? She wanted Dad to be gone before anyone ever knew. Dad knew, though. Oh, he knew all along. How did she meet him? Who was it? She stared down the bed at her legs and her slippered feet and smiled to herself. It was Mr. Linus. No. It was Mr. Linus, Ed Linus. This is, I said, and found there wasn't a word. It is indeed, Victoria agreed, and silence fell. The eternal moan of Conchita's Hoover downstairs only seeming to make the room even quieter. So Mr. Linus, he just continued living there, even though, once me and Max were older, it got difficult, it got tenser, and apparently the Linuses were getting on worse by that point anyway. Anyway, what's for sure is one day he just left, started a new life in South America. And Mum and Dad said, righto, we won't mention him again. And they didn't. Until the other night. He died in Brazil 4 years ago. A single tear crept onto her cheek, and I grabbed her hand. Sorry. Stupid thing to cry over. It's the damn medication. I can't do anything without feeling ill. You don't need to explain. I was just thinking, well, you know, what does this mean in terms of what happened? As in? With us. She gripped my hand. Well, we're half-brother and half-sister. We're half as related as we thought. Still in the wrong. Still definitely in the wrong, but shall we say we were half as bad as we believed we were, and leave it at that? Right. She looked down for a moment, then fixed me with her dark eyes. I said there were 2 things to talk about. Here's the second. I don't want you to see me decline anymore. I don't want you to come again. Please don't say that. We'll talk on the phone. We can talk every day, just... I don't want you to come. You're the one person I can't wither in front of. Do you get that? I can't do this. Please, old boy. I was clenching my teeth with the effort of not crying. I forced myself to nod. Larger than life, she said after a while. Never settle for less than that. Remember? You promised. Okay. We spoke again a week later. I told her that I'd been to see Mum. And did you discuss the life-changing revelation? No. We talked about this recipe for soup she's got. We laughed, and I pretended not to notice the coughing that followed. I was alone in the house that night. Lauren came back tipsy from the book club, where not much literature had been discussed by the look of it. We lay together, talking about the wedding. You'll be such a handsome father of the bride, she said. I'm so proud of you not drinking. Proud of your husband for not being an alcoholic. Shh. Shush. She kissed me on the cheek. As usual, Lauren fell asleep very quickly. I escaped at last into a vague, threatening dream, only to be hauled back out by the wail of the phone. Lauren groaned and sighed and turned over, The clock was at exactly 5:30. "Maybe it's Beth," Lauren slurred through sleep. "I'm sure it's okay," I said. But my stomach was curling into a ball, and as I walked downstairs to the phone in the hall, my legs threatened to fold up beneath me. When I heard the voice at the other end, all the jitters flattened out into a single deadening fact. "Dominic, this is Tom." As his voice began to frame the words, I could not quite bring myself to hear. I wandered into the living room. Daly would be opening his shop down the road. I still walked past now and then, knowing I could not go in again. Mum would already be attending to her knitting, and 300 miles away, Beth would be doing much the same in her student room. Victoria had died in the night, yet everything else was going on as it always did. Victoria had left detailed instructions for her send-off in a handwritten note. "None of this business of a cheerful funeral. I want them miserable as hell, dressed in black. But no flowers. Give to a kids' charity instead. Toast me and put me next to Dad. Over and out. Fee." All this was carried out. More than 600 people turned up. They crammed into every corner. Max called her the best sister anyone could have had. The cricketer described a marriage of unbroken happiness. At the Shillingworths afterwards, I was close to breaking my new vow of sobriety as guests picked awkwardly at a huge tray of assorted cheeses. Around several of the rooms, the cricketer had arranged photographs of Victoria. I stood for a long time looking at a shot of her in her wedding dress, snapped with my little camera, just before I went to rejoin the congregation. Beth came up and touched my arm. "Are all these pictures yours?" "No. This one is. Most of the younger ones are. I didn't get as many chances later." "You never told me what you fell out over." "I'll tell you one day." "Yours are the best." She squeezed my shoulder. "You're an amazing photographer." It came as a surprise, and was closer to bringing tears out of me than anything else that day, a day I had got through with a shutting off of my heart. "Thank you, Beth." "I mean it." She hugged me at the foot of the stairs, 30 paces from where Victoria and I had parted for the final time. By the time I saw her next, the wedding campaign was quite far advanced. Invitations had been sent out. Max was, of course, to be Rowley's best man. How many 19-year-old brides have their 54-year-old uncle as best man, Lauren? It's creepy. That's a swell thing to say about your brother. Still, I suppose what's really creepy is that she's marrying a man who's nearly 40 himself. Are you determined to ruin this? You don't like it any more than I do. You're just in denial. Supportive, Dom. It's called being supportive. I just wish she'd talk to us about some of it. Lauren fretted. When finally the new year got underway, Lauren began to call Beth more and more often, but the snippets of new wedding information she received only made her fret more. They would be writing their own vows. They were proposing to walk into a hideous piece of dance music called Firestarter. I hated to see how worried Lauren was after these conversations, and once or twice tried to call Beth and reason with her. But the outcome was always the same. A sigh, a measured response. "It's what we want, Dad." Lauren was getting more fearful almost by the day. The weekend before the wedding, she went to the hen night in a restaurant. She came back later than I'd expected, and much more sober than I'd hoped. How was it? Awful. What? Damn. She doesn't love him. Based on? She just seems so distracted all night, so unhappy. She's probably just nervous. She's nervous because she's making a mistake and she knows it. And in customary style, she got to her feet and left me, with a dramatic utterance to digest. But maybe this one was right, I thought. Whether I could do anything about it was another matter. Time was short now. I tried to reassure Lauren. Jitters. Collywobbles, as Victoria had once said. But there'd been a good reason for her reservations, and I feared there were good reasons for Beth's. Neither Lauren nor I slept much as the week went by. The night before we were entertained by Max and Conchita. The old man and his wife had gone to a hotel for the night, and Smoothface was dining there with them and his own family. Beth smiled politely at everything and toyed with her raven black hair. She went to bed early, and Lauren drove Mum home soon afterwards. Staying here on the eve of the wedding had seemed a good idea somehow. I'd be close to Beth, I thought, and in some odd way close to Victoria too. Shortly before the clock's long-winded declaration of midnight, I began to realise that it had been a mistake. There was no possibility of sleep at all. I went into the trophy room. I stayed there for as long as I could bear, until I had broken the back of the night. At 6 o'clock I washed my face and changed into my suit and helped myself to breakfast. Then I sat and waited. Everyone was here except Beth. Invisible amid all the activity, I made scrambled eggs on toast and took it up the staircase. I knocked on Beth's door and was groggily admitted. She sat up in bed. "Is that for me?" "Of course. It's your wedding day." "Breakfast in bed, wow." She rubbed chunks of goo from her eyes. Her hair was matted from the pillow. She's so young, I thought. "What's going on downstairs?" she asked. "All in order," I said. "Make-up people and so on are all here. Bridesmaids are being done." She sank back against the bedstead with a low groan. "You all right, Beth?" "I just don't quite fancy all this hassle," she said. She reached for the tray, somehow missed and upset it, dumping the plate of eggs onto the duvet. "Oh, fuck!" "It's all right," I said. "We can soon—" "Fucking hell!" She looked close to crying. "Now I've spilled bloody eggs on the bed and everyone's waiting downstairs and—" "It's all right." I was desperate to avoid winding her up further. "Do you want to have a bath or something, and I'll clear this up? Or I can just leave you alone completely, whatever you want." "I don't know what I want," she said, staring down at the yellow-brown mess in front of her. So gently that she could hardly have felt it, I touched her on the shoulder. She looked up. "Beth, can I ask you a stupid question?" She almost smiled. "You don't normally ask permission. Do you really want this?" "What?" "Do you really want to marry him?" Moments passed. Cars were pulling up outside. The doorbell rang. A bath was running. Suddenly she was crying. I put my arm out, but she shoved it away. "Why are you asking me? When you know? When you know there's not a thing—" "It's not too late, Beth." "Of course it's too late. What am I going to do? Just walk away now?" "If you want to get out of it," I said, "I can get you out of it." Beth sniffed and shook her head contemptuously. "Well, I'd like to see you do that, Dad. I really would." I took a deep breath. "If you don't want to do this," I said, "I swear on my sister's grave you are not going to do it." This might have been hammy, but it shut her up. "You just have to give me a sign," I said. She looked at me for a long moment. "Can I have a bath?" Beth padded halfway across the room and stopped. "Dad, do you mean it?" "I've never meant anything more." I felt light-headed and wobbly as I came down the stairs. At 10-1, as cars began to crunch and growl their ways out of the drive, I was alone with Beth again. Her smile was bright and synthetic. She sat in the chair she had been placed in almost 2 hours ago. "Did you mean what you said before?" "Yes." Up, up, up went the speed of my heart. "Dad, I don't want to do it. Get me out of here." "Are you absolutely sure?" She nodded and put her hand over her eyes. "All right. We're going outside. I will seem to be photographing you. Go and stand by the escort, all right?" The last few guests were being loaded into cars. Everyone waved at Beth or sent some chipper remark her way. She replied in kind. She was walking like a drunk, like someone who would keel over any moment. The wedding car was due. I looked at Beth and saw Victoria 30 years ago at the crossroads of her life. "Stay there," I said to Beth. "Stay there 2 minutes. Dad, don't leave me." The last car had slipped into the narrow road and gone. "Dad, 3 minutes." I walked back into the Shillingworth place, knowing it was the last time I would ever set foot in there. I went to the trophy room. The door, like a drugged guard dog, barely creaked. I pulled down a cricket bat from a shelf, one of the cricketers' bats. I swung it at random and knocked a cup down from its shelf. Swung it again and hit a photo. There was a tinkle and a nasty crack as it landed face down in front of me. I swung it again and again, sent showers of glass through the air, sent ornaments flying. I sought out the picture of Victoria with the cricketer and buried the bat in it. It slid slowly to the ground. I dropped the bat and ran outside. Beth was pacing furiously by the escort. "What the hell were you doing?" "It doesn't matter. Come on, get in." I opened the passenger door, but there was the wedding car now, its tyres massaging the gravel, its driver in his hat and double-breasted jacket. Beth looked at the shiny car in despair, and I felt my insides slide. "I have to go with him." "No, you don't. Get in." I was grabbing her arm now, bundling the dress inside. There was so much of it. She sprawled across the back seat of the car, the dress all around her, her mouth slack with fear. "They're going to kill me." "No one's going to kill you," I said. "If you go to that wedding, it might kill you." "What's going to happen to you?" Her voice was as small as when she was 4 years old. I glanced in the mirror and saw her eyes, enormous and terrified and exhilarated. The smallest smile came onto her face, a grin of possibilities unbound. "I think I'll be all right, old girl," I said, and slammed down on the accelerator to take her past the startled driver of the classic car, out of the drive, out onto the open road. It is 10 years now since I drove you out of the Shillingworth's place. It's fair to say that it's taken most of those 10 years for the storm to blow over. We can agree now it was the right thing to do. We can also agree it was wrong to smash up the trophy room. That's life. You don't get everything right. It could be another 10 years, or longer still, before you read this. It might be that you never read it. I'll make sure that I'm long gone before you even have the option. But at least you will have the option. So many people leave life without having explained everything, without having said even half of what they'd like to say. What happened between Victoria and me would never be forgiven by most people. She was right that a couple of decades are enough to change the world's mind on most things, but not on this. It would be nice if you read this, you forgive me. But I didn't write it all down for that. I just wanted a record to exist somewhere. What happened to Dad could happen to me. If it does, I'll forget all this. It will be removed from my brain, one memory at a time. I'll forget everything that came after, too. I'll forget Max writing to me last year to suggest a reconciliation, and the handshake on the beach at Southwold which sealed it. The awkward way we stood around afterwards, making small talk. His laugh when I suggested a game of cricket. I'll forget why on the same beach, if you go onto the pier where hundreds of little public-sponsored gold plaques stretch out over the sea, you can find one that simply says, "Old girl." That's why I wanted you to have this, even if having read it you end up thinking less of me. If you want, you can destroy it. You can allow yourself never to think about it. But it will live on somewhere in your mind, long after I have slipped quietly away, like a photographer leaving a wedding.
Julian Reintadt was reading The Knot by Mark Watson, abridged for radio by John Peacock. It was directed by Celia de Wolfe and was a peer production for BBC Radio 4.